to myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. It's Thursday night, which means it's Supermac and Gibbo joining me. And good evening to you guys. How are you?
All right, Steve. Thank you.
Good to have you on, guys. As always, good to have you on.
Good.
Good. Better than my team, unfortunately, lads. And let's get the worst stuff out the way first, Malcolm. Since I last sat down with you last week, we've had two games, Aston Villa and Leeds United, and we've lost both of them.
Yeah, lost both of them, and I think we've had two shots on target in all of those minutes. 180 minutes, yes.
Wow.
So it's sort of averaging a shot a game. And
don't forget, we scored against Leeds. Wow. Only thing was, it was a consolation. The same as the last one we scored, it was in a defeat.
Well, yes, it was, John, but they scored against Leeds, and 4 minutes later gave Leeds a goal.
Absolutely. The marking on that goal, Malcolm, when he was at outside left in our right back position, the marking. But I'll ask you one question, Malcolm. Having seen earlier what happened when, unfortunately, a poor winger who's trying to make a career for himself as a winger was played at right back a few games back, Murphy, and got taken out. They put him at right back again against Leeds. He loses the ball on the first goal after only quarter of an hour. And when they scored their second, they scored in the right back position with absolutely nobody marking the kid who put it home, which was Murphy's position, of course. You don't want an outside right to have to learn to be a fullback because he can't do it. It's too late in his career. Yet we had two fullbacks, and I know they're not good, Malcolm, but he had two orthodox fullbacks sitting on the bench in Kraft and Managerial, but he plays Murphy.
John, I'm looking at all of it, and all I see is utter madness. And I try and explain it. I can't. It's almost as if he says, right, I'm going to just chuck up 10 names and see where they fall on my little pitch here.
The interesting thing, Malcolm,
where they've fallen. It's absolute sheer nonsense. You know, the job of a manager is to give his players absolutely every chance to go and shine. And Steve Bruce is doing quite the reverse with the players. Quite the reverse. And, it's just left me literally scratching my head. And still, when you see there are things so blatantly wrong on the pitch, and Steve Bruce, he's like that.
Well, the gloves are off, Malcolm. This is his way now. If you remember, for the previous 18 months, we've been doing it someone else's way. But this is his way now. So 2 shots in 2 games is progress, is it?
Why the players must have had a confrontation some while back and said, look, we know better than you. Let us do it our way. And in all honesty, it hasn't improved since Steve Bruce took the control back. It hasn't improved one iota.
Have you noticed, Malcolm?
So demoralised. Sorry, John.
Have you noticed, Malcolm, as well, when he made the statement of my way initially, his first team selection went to a flat back 4, an extra man in midfield, and 2 up top, which was, by his standards, quite progressive. But in the last 2 matches of my way, the next 2 after that, we've gone back to a back 5. And then having had 2 up top against Aston Villa, we went with just Wilson up top in the last game. So we really reverted back to what was their way instead of my way as far as the tactical formation's concerned. And don't you think, Malcolm, the bar is so low now that we're grasping at straws, and Steve Bruce is, by saying that because we got over the halfway line a few times in the second half um, against Leeds, that was a terrific performance. We can now hang our hat on that performance and expect things to get that much better from now on in. The bar is so low now that we're clinging to a display in the second half against Leeds, is thinking that might be what will get us out of trouble. While, Steve, you'll have noticed that Burnley have had 3 wins on the trot, gone above us and are disappearing. Brighton have had 7 points. Fulham have had 6 points from 6 draws, while we've had 2 points. Even Sheffield United, who are still tailed off, have had 7 points, having had 2 wins, having beaten Manchester United. And who else was it? Oh, yes, Newcastle United. So they've had 7 points, while we've had 2. If we aren't seeing the signs that are 6-foot high letters saying danger, because we've got the least points during all this conflab, where are we heading? We are in big trouble, and we've got to do something about it quick. And as far as I can see, the only thing that's changed so far, with a couple of days left in the transfer market, is we've got an assistant manager, an assistant coach. There's a lot of responsibility on his shoulders that in the last few days he's produced something on the training pitch which is magically going to change everything at Everton on Saturday lunchtime.
Well, that's Chippers has asked that question, Mal. Chippers has asked that question for both of you, but we'll come to you, Malcolm. The only club is Newcastle, the only club with 3 assistant managers to assist a manager.
Well, what I'd like to know is, has this fella come in from Bournemouth as the number 2, number 1, or number 2, number 2, or number 2, number 3?
Are they number 1, number 2?
Is he a false 10?
Or
2 false 10s we might be playing with.
You know, has the fella got a bit of control? You know, and the appointment of him is actually saying to us all, Steve Bruce ain't good enough, and neither are his 2 number 2s. That's what it's saying to us, that the club knows that the whole setup is wrong, not good enough, but they'd make an addition which has cost £250,000 rather than get rid.
Did Steve Bruce know about this? Did Steve Bruce know about this? Did he know about this, Mal? Did he agree with this new coach coming in?
I can't see how he would have agreed, because what's he going to do with 3 number 2s?
Can I jump in there and say that, as far as I'm concerned, Malcolm, looking at the situation, you know, the interesting thing from my point of view is that this guy is going to have a big input. And by the way, I'm not having to go at Graham Jones, because he's got a pedigree with Belgium, etc., and we hope to heck he brings some good ideas. But first of all, he's going to ruffle the feathers, is he not, of Agnew and Clements, who are Steve Bruce's men. So it
have been for many years in a number of clubs.
And looks, to my way of thinking, this is a club decision that they need somebody else in there to ruffle feathers, to produce, and it's a minimum cost to get somebody in. If you move out Steve Bruce and his 2 coaches, that costs a fortune in compensation. If you bring in 1 coach but give him huge power, that costs it would cost a lot more than £250,000 to move Steve Bruce, Steve Agnew and Clements out of the club. It costs only £250,000 to bring this guy in, and this guy will be there to ruffle feathers. And there's one thought, you know, if it come to, and I'm not saying this is the club's thinking, This is the thinking of fans and suspicious people like myself. If it come to a parting of the ways with Steve Bruce before the end of the season, no doubt his regular coaches would go with him, and that would normally leave Newcastle, as I said on last week's programme, Steve, when in the past they've had a caretaker within the club like Chris Hughton, who stepped up and done an exceptionally good job. They haven't had a caretaker because all would leave on block. But Graham Wilson will not have come to Newcastle United without total reassurance, that his position is safe if anything happens to Steve Bruce in the foreseeable future. And if his position is safe and the other three go out, then Graham Jones ends up as caretaker manager. They've got a caretaker manager now if he is required, and they hadn't a caretaker manager before Graham Jones arrived. That's the thinking of a lot of people in the game, and it's my thinking.
That's a good way of looking at it, John, and I think a lot of people had thought of it that way. I mean, I thought it was bizarre, Malcolm, as Mad Mark says, let's celebrate Steve Bruce achieving his 200th Premier League defeat from 450 games. Well done, Steve.
Can I, on top of that, can I give you some stats? Think about this, because Steve Bruce, he's in his 19th month as manager of Newcastle United. He's just entered his 23rd year in management, and he has had 11 clubs. So that's suggesting that he never lasts 2 years. And we're seeing exactly that it all falls apart midway through the second year for him. He started at Sheffield United, was there for 10.5 months. He went to Huddersfield and lasted 17 months. He then went to Wigan and lasted 2 months. Crystal Palace, 5 months. Birmingham, he lasted actually 6 years there. But then he went to Wigan, 19 months. Sunderland, just over 2 years. Hull City, 4 years. Aston Villa, 2 years. Sheffield Wednesday, 6 months. And Newcastle United, here we are at 18/19 months, and everything's fallen apart some while back. So he's got no real history to say that he can improve the situation any. And in all honesty, if he declares what a great supporter of Newcastle United he is, why doesn't he just do the club a real sincere favour and just walk away?
Because it's going to cost him too much money.
Not want to pay off. He's had so many payoffs, and I just wonder. Well, is that what the fella's in the game for?
Yeah, it's got to be, because he's going to, he stands to lose far too much money. I would imagine that the 1.5 million is an issue for Mike Ashley as well, because the deal's done now with the PIF if the deal is going to go through. So he isn't going to want to sack Steve Bruce, Steve Agnew and co, because it's going to cost him money, and that money will have to come out of his pocket. So I think John's right. I think Graham Jones has been brought in for one reason and one reason only, and that is if he does have to make that decision, that we've got a caretaker manager who will come in until the takeover goes through. Graham Jones' appointment and his unveiling yesterday, I have never in all my years, and I go back to 1984, have I ever seen an assistant manager or a coach be unveiled in such a way. He had a suit on. He's sitting there as if he's the new manager. In fact, there was probably more of a showcase for him arriving and a big hurrah for him arriving than there was for Steve Bruce. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing on the official club channels. Really,
I
yeah.
wasn't aware of this, Steve.
Oh my! I mean, if you go onto the club website, he's there in a suit. Normally these people come in, and when Steve Bruce has been asked about him, Steve Bruce he doesn't really want to speak about him. And in one of the interviews that the press did, he just I think John probably has heard this amongst the press corps. He just said, well, he's another pair of eyes. Well, if he's another, if he's somebody that Bruce has had something to do with coming into the club, he wouldn't just be another pair of eyes, John, would he?
No, without a shadow of doubt, he's got a lot more clout than that. And I think with due respect to Steve Agnew, who I knew when he was at Gateshead playing for me, and with Stephen Clements, I think that this guy has got an awful lot more clout than they have. And when you listen to his quotes, they were very significant. They were like managerial quotes, weren't they? He was on about there's very good players here who aren't in the team at the moment, and the job is to get them in the team in the right positions and doing the right job for Newcastle. And he's absolutely right in that, but it's the spokesman, it's the speak of a manager, not of a coach or someone that's putting the cones out on the training pitch. There's no question that he's brought in with an awful lot more clout than is normal, and it's significant that Ashley has looked at this, and this is a cheaper way of trying to get some sort of certainty about staying in the Premier League than sacking 3 guys with the compensation that would entail. And then if those 3 guys had gone, who would have come in as caretaker? There's absolutely nobody there. You would be down to Dawson, who was on the reserve side, or Steve Harper, who was a lovely, lovely man in Newcastle through and through, but hasn't got the experience to suddenly be a Premier League manager tomorrow morning. So there is the feeling that this is the parachute on the back.
Yep, I would agree. I think so. Rafa Benitez, Malcolm. He's a free agent again. Now, I just saw your face there, so I know what you're going to say. But he's a free agent. Is that a coincidence?
No, I think that he had his problems, didn't he? Because he couldn't just freely travel between. He was the other side of the world, for heaven's sake, in China. And his family is still on Merseyside, so he was forever having to go into lockdowns and what have you. So it was making his life very, very confusing and difficult. And so I think he's seen a bit of sense and is staying back with his family. I think he's an absolutely brilliant manager, knows how to treat players, knows how to get the best out of them. But I'm always very doubtful and very suspicious about going back for a second time. Very doubtful, very suspicious on that. It all too often just doesn't work. And I think he's a lovely fella. And a terrific football manager, but I really don't think it would work. And for heaven's sake, to be walking into this is going to take somebody a very long time to get the whole club cleansed of what Bruce and his 2 cohorts have done.
What's your take on Rafa then, John?
Steve, I think you would probably agree with me. As the facts, as opposed to opinion, the facts are, as long as Mike Ashley owns this football club, Rafa Benitez will not put a foot inside of it, either from his point of view, because he knows the restraints that Ashley brings, or from Ashley's point of view, who looked at him just as, by the end of his reign, just as a pest, who was always asking for things like progress. And he didn't want to have to face that sort of situation. Steve Bruce gets on with the job and doesn't hassle the owner for certain things. That appeals hugely to Ashley. There's as much chance of Benitez coming manager of Newcastle again, as long as Ashley stays in charge, is there is of Ashley phoning up Alan Shearer and asking him to be the assistant coach to Benitez for the rest of the season. Those two are not in Ashley's phone book anymore. It could be a totally different ball game, of course, if Ashley's sold to the Saudis, whether I think Benitez would then walk to Newcastle if asked, and I think Amanda Staveley would ask him if it was up to her. That's a different ball game. But in the current circumstances, not a chance. As much chance as there is of getting him together with Alan Shearer and having Lord Lucan, Howard Hughes and Shergar as the three assistant managers.
There was one positive from the game at the weekend, and that was ASM back, in the squad. And when he came on, Malcolm, there was a spark of life there. And I saw the stats, which were after the game, and it was our best spell. 75% possession. We had leads on the back foot. Most passes completed. All of those stats in our favour. And that last 20 minutes, Newcastle looked as if they were ready to compete. But St Maximin's been laid off. He's been laid off. He's had COVID. We don't know how badly affected he was with it, but it was enough for him to disappear for quite some time. But there's going to be a lot of emphasis placed on him now, I'm sure, after that.
Well, there is, but he'll very quickly get sickened off, and the reason why I say that is that he needs options. The option to take on a defence, or the option to play a pass, make a run, get it back. Nobody's really looking to play with him because he gets it and he breaks 20 or 30 yards. Everybody's back there. I was watching Leeds hurtling across the halfway line, heading for Newcastle's box. Four players on a sprint, and Newcastle players just not really bothering to get back. And yet, when St Maximin, in the same game, he starts to make a run, and there's Wilson, and that's it. Nobody's coming there and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this. And so St Maximin is looking around, and there's no support, there's no help. All he can do is just take people on. And they're just sort of manoeuvring him in a direction away from the goal, making it very difficult for him. And he will get thoroughly fed up with it, and very quickly, because there's just no support coming.
I've got to hope a little bit more, Mal, because to me he's the biggest hope we've got. Because in a team that's very robotic, for example, the other 10, well, forget the goalkeeper, the other 9 outfield players, we know exactly what they're capable of doing and what they will do and what they can't do. Maximin brings that unpredictability to the table, and the one thing you hope with him there, he actually, I think, does lift players around him. This is if he's fit enough to do it. He does lift players around him. He gives players around him some hope, and he frightens the opposition because they don't know what he's going to do. They do know what the rest are going to do. And therefore, it gives a little bit of hope to us. Is that little bit different? We've got to get a spark from somewhere. And I think, in that little cameo against Leeds, he brought hope to me. He brings hope to the crowd. I thought Almiron suddenly thought, I run 100 miles a match and there's nobody with me. This guy will be with me once I get on my bike. We've got a chance there. He must give some hope to Wilson that there's going to be more support and more supply than he gets when he's not in the side. And on a good day, he is a class player. Yes, he can have his moody days and the bad days, but how many players going around the Newcastle team outside of Wilson and outside of possibly the keepers can you say are real pure class? That ability to be that is in St. Maximum. He's only 23 and he's coming back from coronavirus. It's asking a lot to be the saviour of Newcastle United.
Absolutely.
But right now, we've got to hang our hat on somebody because I tell you what, however much we moan about Steve Bruce, however much we're sick of watching Newcastle United play the way they do, however much we're fed up with 11-match run without a win, we do not want this side to go down, because if this side goes down, we'll get a new owner, we'll get a new coach, manager, whatever. We don't want to be starting by down there again. This side has got to stay up, and it'll probably stay up because of the three, if it does stay up, because of the three clubs at the bottom. But we've got to look to get some points somewhere. And the biggest hope I've got, because Wilson is getting no help at all and having scored something like 6 and 7 at the start. He's got about 2 and 10 since. He is suffering, and we've got to get somebody in. And outside of suddenly buying 4 magicians between now and Monday's transfer deadline, our hope is St. Maximum. So
let's talk about that, John. Let's talk about the transfer window. Any gossip, mate? You still get you still get your info. You still have your ear to the ground. Any news on that?
Sure. The fact that there's gone out is a help. Newcastle always leave it to the death, don't they? Especially in this window. It's always the last couple of days. We're going to get players out, which is off the wage bill. Certainly, Yedlin will go. He's going to Galatasaray, so he will go. Presumably, they'll get his visa when we didn't. So Yedlin will have gone. Richie could well go to Bournemouth. Lazar's going to have his contract cancelled so that he can go back to Italy. I know this isn't bringing in transfer fees, but it's freeing up wages. And I think we'll sign at least 1 and maybe 2. They will only be on loan with a little loan fee, which has to be paid. What position will they be? That depends on availability. But centre midfield looks a knocking bet. But having said all that, it doesn't hold out great hope for me. I don't see us. We're not going to get a 20-goal a season man to go alongside Wilson. We're not going to get a quality middle of the park player like Jack Grealish or like they got Ross Barkley, etc., etc. So it's going to be mix and match in the loan system, and hoping that we can get the current players playing in the right position and getting in the team, because a lot of players haven't got in the team. We've learned, Richie, with a terrific attitude, has got nowhere near the team for Yonks. Why, with his attitude, when we need good attitude? Dwight Gayle, who the last time Newcastle won, scored the winning goal, hasn't started a match since. That tells you an awful lot. And what it tells you is that he hasn't got a future here with Steve Bruce, because his contract is up at the end of the season. So there's been stubborn decisions. 1 minute Sean Longstaff in his flavour of the month, and so is Matty because he's signed a new contract. Next minute, you don't see them. 1 minute Yedlin is playing right back. The next minute he hasn't got a visa and he's off to Galatasaray. And Jacob Murphy, who is a winger, is playing right back and naturally making a bundle of mistakes defensively. The whole thing is chaotic. So I come back to basics and saying the best hope we've got if getting support for Wilson is St. Maximum rather than the transfer market, although we will get a couple in on loan, I believe, or certainly 1, probably a couple.
Malcolm Chowdhury's linked from Leicester. That's heavily linked, and with Richie going out, the potential of another midfield player coming in, we're crying out for some creativity in there. But it will just be loan deals. I can't see any permanent transfers coming in.
Won't be.
I suppose Do you agree with John? Is ASM going to be the difference, keeping him fit and making sure that he's playing on a regular basis? Because there is no doubt we will play better with him in the team.
Yes, I would agree. But what he needs, is support. He needs to be given options by players joining in with what he's doing, and all he's seeing in front of him is Wilson. And Wilson is being marked by 2 and 3 defenders, and so Maximin, he's so he is limited as to what he can do, because all he can do is just run with the ball and see if he can take on players and maybe get beyond them. But there's a lot of defenders there, because he makes the second forward when he does go on these runs. It needs more. You know what? Why not play Wilson and Gayle up front? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with that? I find it quite bizarre. That Gayle, he scored a goal and hasn't played since.
Do you believe there's been a fallout in the dressing room, Mal? You've been in dressing rooms all your life, Malcolm. That you've managed, you've played at the highest level. You've played with England. You've played at Newcastle. You're a legend at every club you've played at. Is the dressing room fallout something which has been denied constantly? Is it clear for all to see that he's fallen out with players, and the players that he's fell out with are the ones who aren't getting the game?
Well, that's not good management, because what is good management is that you can fall out with a player, you can have a right rot with him, but having had that, you put him in the side because you want to see the response that he's going to give you. And a lot of the time it works. I remember Don Howe doing it to me. By heavens, it was on a Friday morning, and he just went at me. He absolutely went at me for over an hour. He never said a word to anybody else. He just went at me for over an hour. And the following day we were playing West Brom, and I just had to take, and it was getting to the point where I was looking around at other players, and they were sort of cowering away in the corners of the dressing room for fear that they'd be dragged into it, but they weren't. He just stuck with me. And having had such a go, I was played in the side the following day, and I went and scored a hat-trick against West Brom, Don Howe's old club that he had managed. And as I was coming off the pitch, Don Howe was stood there, and I'd scored a hat-trick. And I said, "You can stick that where the sun don't shine." And he just looked at me, smiled, and he said, "But it worked, didn't it? Come and see me in my room." And he took me into his room, and he explained exactly why he did it in the way that he did it, and why he just picked on one person. He said, "You see, the thing was that I knew you'd respond out on the pitch." He said, "But me giving you such a going over," he said, "what an effect it had on everybody else. They went out without me saying a word to them, and they were all brilliant." And we beat West Brom 3-0 on the day. And he was absolutely right. So if you're having an argument with a player and you have a bit of a falling out in the dressing room, play him. See what kind of an effect it's had on him. But otherwise, a row and a ruck has gone wasted if you don't use it for the benefit of the team and the club.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Jetro and Chowdhury, what was the point in signing Hendrick garbage. Should have took a punt on Wilshere for creativity as long as you put legs around him, says Kevin McGarry. Lots of comments coming in about the potential transfers. Of course, Jetro Willems was at Newcastle last season, got a horrendous injury. Big fans' favourite in a short space of time that he played. Talk of him coming back would be interesting. Someone has also said should try Kabai. He'd still do well in the midfield. He's 35 and he'd still outrun half the buggers we've got. Ginger Hoskin with a rumour of Damari Gray leaving for 1.8 million to Palace. Why haven't we jumped in? Jesse Lingard is getting mentioned, of course, and Josh King from Bournemouth. So lots of names getting thrown into the mix, John. But I think Chowdhury and Willems will probably be the names that come in. That will be my guess anyway. And I think Richie and Richie potentially Kraft and Yedlin out.
Yeah, I think you're looking down the right lines, mate. Chowdhury, the one thing that I would say there is in lots of ways I see him as a more defensive-minded midfielder than somebody that's going to drive into the box in support of Wilson. The other thing I would say is that it would be quite significant, wouldn't it, if on the weekend Chowdhury comes in, Richie goes to Bournemouth, which is probably appropriate because if you remember, Chowdhury's the one that just about decapitated Richie when he was out for that long time when we played against Leicester. Remember that horrendous tackle on Matt Ritchie. So probably Chowdhury get that bugger out to Bournemouth, else he'll have his revenge on the training ground when I come into club. Only kidding on that, but Chowdhury could come. But I'm not certain he's the driving force that we need. We've got to get somebody that's a bit different from what we've got now. Willems is the sort of bloke that Newcastle United would sign at this stage. He would be perfect. And may I say that the guy that was here, I would welcome back into this club, considering we haven't got a left back of consequence. I would welcome him back into this club with open arms. The only doubt I've got is that I don't know what that savage injury has taken out of him, if anything, in terms of mentally or in terms of mobility in getting around the pitch. Bad injuries can affect players who are never what they were after they've had a bad injury. So that would be my only concern. If it was the Willems of old, go and get him yesterday, never mind today or tomorrow. But that would be my concern there. But yes, him and Chowdhury are the sort of players that are likely are two of the names in the forefront that could come here. Whether that would be enough for us, Steve, under the circumstances, but I'm just hoping that and I'm going back to San Maximum, and I take the fear that Malcolm's got, but I'm desperate not to have that fear, because if I've got that fear as well, I haven't got anything a bit of flotsam passing in the wind to hang on to for the rest of the season. So I'm hoping that San Maximum could stay fit, can start to bury into the place, can liven up the centre forward because he thinks I've got a chance again, can encourage Almiron to run like the wind even more so. And in fairness, I think Almiron ran in support of him against Leeds when he did come on. And I agree with Malcolm, and I've said it all along, I would play down there at Everton, I would play Gayle up front with Wilson, starting with Maximum and having Almiron. Both Maximum and Almiron are quick, and it will get from back to front quick. And those two up front. I don't think for 1 second, unless he's desperate, that and he is desperate, that Steve Bruce will start with Gayle, because he's obviously got something against that. Because when you are drowning in heavy seas and a guy scores you a winning goal and you never start him in about 9 games since, there's a reason why, because you need a life belt. And he looks like he can be a life belt, but has never started. There's something between Gayle and the manager without question, and I suspect it's because this guy's away at the end of the season for whatever reason. His contract's up and Newcastle can't prevent him doing that. And I think he's beginning to think enough's enough. my backside's been warmed enough on the subs bench. That is where my future is at Newcastle United, and I don't want that future. At 31, he can't afford to sit on the bench for the next 2 years, else his career's gone.
Yes. Yeah, that's understandable, but why doesn't Steve Bruce stick him in the side now and get a last couple of months out of him?
Yep.
Absolutely. And of course, if he did that, Malcolm, if he did that, and Gayle got regular starts and scored 2 and 3 goals, who's to say he won't sign a new contract and stay here then with that encouragement,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yes.
But you tell me who can go in the side ahead of Gayle and potentially score more goals than Gayle. Because we don't score goals.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, John. And you've just mentioned if you play Gayle up front with Wilson, you've got Sir Maximin on one side, Almiron on the other. That's a frightening attacking force for the opposition, and it needs then good support from the middle of the park, and when you're only scoring 2 goals every 10 games. The pressure that then falls on your back line is immense, absolutely immense. And so that defence is under constant pressure, and they're just desperate for up there to create a bit of relief for the back line. And they're not getting it. So all the time they're under pressure. Well, of course they're going to keep cracking. And I when there's so much staring the 3 of us and all the other people who are viewing, that there are such obvious things. What I don't understand is that they haven't been obvious to Steve Bruce or his 2 coaches, for heaven's sake.
Well, hopefully this new coach will pick up the things that they've been missing.
Okay. Yes, Steve. Yes, I understand that. Now, the thing is, what's going to happen when he says to Steve Bruce, no, don't play him, play that one over there? There's going to be ructions, there's going to be rows, because if Steve Bruce now has got to try and assert an authority, if over nobody else, but the new fella who's just come in, and it's.
Malcolm, we're going to do it my way and not their way. So we're going to do now. We're doing it his way.
Can I ask both of you? Look, you both pick up stories, and you know, you usually got your finger on the pulse. I know it's difficult because we're all locked down, and you know we don't have the same kind of get-togethers as we used to at this moment in time. Where did this appointment come from? Because we've had 13 years of Mike Ashley listening to the wrong people and taking football advice. Where did this appointment of Graham Jones come from?
Well, for one, I don't know, and if it's being said that the only reason why Steve Bruce is remaining there is because, and he and his 2 coaches, that the owner doesn't want to pay his contract up. Why is he paying Bournemouth £250,000 for the services of a 3rd number 2? That to me is absolutely crazy. And then you tell me that Steve Bruce knew nothing about it. Then that makes it doubly crazy.
I mean, his interview on Sky Sports told you he didn't know anything about it. He refused to answer the question, and then in his interviews with some of the press, you know, prior to the Leeds game, he, you know, literally said he's another pair of eyes. That's it. It's not somebody he's even considered bringing in. So, you know, it's strange. Yeah, I mean, John, any indications?
Can I just say something on that, Steve?
Yeah.
If somebody had called Don Howe, Keith Birkinshaw, who have been number twos or head coaches at the clubs where I've been. If somebody had said that about them or to them, they would have gone absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. Another pair of eyes. It's nothing to do with eyes. It's the most stupid comment that I think I've ever heard in a very long while. What you're wanting is somebody to be able to come in who has got the ability to get through to players, to get them organised, positioned, and playing together in a very positive manner and in an organised manner. Pair of eyes, dear me. If that's how Steve Bruce sees himself, no wonder Newcastle are in such dire straits.
Yeah, big shout out to the sponsors for this month, Old Coach House Distillery.co.uk, the world's first alcohol-free distillery. Visit their website, enter the code OCHD and claim your introductory 10% discount and get the most out of your Mindful Dry January. Try the Genesque, it is very, very nice. Also a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle and other things. They also make the Supermac mugs and the t-shirts, which you can get from newcastlelegends.com. If you enjoy the show and you're a first time viewer to the channel, please click that little emblem down in the right hand corner and subscribe to the channel. Also like the video tonight, please, and if you want to share it, it shares to your Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. Just click the share button. Don't forget to comment. We've always got a good chat going on. And also a big shout out to John from Jab, who designs all of our flyers. Before we look ahead to the Everton game, I do just want to take this opportunity to pay a little bit of respect to this young man. 14 years ago, I lost a very good friend, Chris Heron. He's one of the best non-league strikers in the Gated District League. Played for me, I was his manager. He scored in 2 seasons for me, 54 goals in 72 games. A hell of a striker. Didn't ever want to make it to the higher levels. He was basically approached on more than one occasion by league clubs, also approached by Gateshead, but he wanted to spend time with his mates and wanted to spend time with his family and just play on a Sunday morning. He tragically died 14 years ago today, and I do miss him, but I do want to dedicate this particular episode of NUFC Matters to Chris Heron, and my thoughts are with his family tonight.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah. Let's look ahead to.
Absolutely rightly so.
Yeah. Let's look ahead to look ahead to the Everton game then. Saturday, live on BT Sports, 12:30 kickoff, and it's. Well, I don't know whether I'm looking forward to it or not, but the team news: Fernandes remains a doubt after missing the last 3 games. The news still to come on the availability of Kieran Clark and Paul Dummett, of course. As we've already discussed on the show, over the last few days, DeAndre Yedlin's work permit ran out and the club didn't know anything about it, so he's probably going to be unavailable. No news on the Everton team as yet. The referee for this weekend is Stuart Atwell. So looking forward to this game, lads. Malcolm, first to you. Everton against Newcastle. I think it's the first time we've visited Everton on a Saturday for about 10 or 11 years. And on that occasion, we actually got a 1-0 win, I think, with Ben Arthur getting the goal.
Oh, good heavens above.
That's right.
Well, I never. I've watched Everton quite a bit. In the main, they have been playing some terrific stuff. Newcastle are really going to have to be hugely organised if they're going to get anything out of the game. And there is no organisation. There's a back four that has nothing to do with the midfield. The midfield has nothing to do with the back line nor the forward line. And the forwards the same, always a bit of support. And I can't suddenly see that changing overnight. And if you're not organised against Everton, by heavens, they're going to run you into the ground. Yeah,
I would agree, John. I mean, Everton, they're up there, aren't they? You know, they're a team which,
Yep.
you know, they're building. You know, they play some attractive football, and they've got a manager who, you know, knows his team. He's got a plan A, he's got a plan B. You know, it's a tough game for Newcastle to go into in current form.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, Sheffield United was a tough game for Newcastle on current form, and they hadn't won a Premier League game when we went down to Sheffield. Unbelievably, Steve, you do realise, of course, Newcastle are on a double at Everton because we beat Everton 2-1 up here. How on earth that happened is anybody's guess. But if you remember that, we did beat Everton earlier this season 2-1. I think that will see them very much out for revenge. They are a team with games in hand. They're 7th in the table, but they have 2 games in hand over teams like West Ham, Leicester and Man U. They're going to be a handful, and we are going into this. Here's a very depressing set of figures that Steve Bruce seems to have overlooked with his newfound optimism after the second half against Leeds. We are going into this game with 11 games without a win, 9 of the 11 lost, 2 points gained out the last, knocked out of both the domestic cup time, 2 goals scored in the last 9, the extra time at Arsenal, the extra 30 minutes, is exactly 16 hours of football for 2 goals, both of which were only consolation goals in defeats, didn't bring us anything. We're going into that situation. When we beat at the end of November, we were 10th in the Premier League. We're now about to play Palace in the return next Tuesday, and we're 16th in the Premier League. There's only 4 clubs beneath us, and all those 4 clubs are currently harvesting more points than we are. That's and that's the dire straits we have at Everton. We're clinging to bits of flotsam like a goalkeeper that saves 6 certain goals, and Wilson who suddenly scores again, and San Maximin who suddenly produces a bit of magic. And yes, we are in too, because that's the only hope we've got. My concern is that I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough as it happened, because it was a Newcastle defeat, but to get this accurate enough to get the scoreline right at Aston Villa, which was 2-0. And I'm going for another 2-0 defeat, sadly, at Everton. And the only way we can do something about that is our goalkeeper, whether it's Dubrovka, who could well come back, or Darlow, keeps him out. Wilson discovers how to score again, because San Maximin is bombing like Bellio and is inspiring someone like Almiron to help him. That is the feint we carry, but 2-0, sadly, fellas, for me.
Yeah. I mean, I can't see Newcastle getting anything against Everton. I've got to be honest. If we lose against Everton and we lose against Palace, is that it, Malcolm? Will Steve Bruce get the sack? I mean, the way you look at it is, I saw a stat on Sky Sports this morning where they were talking about Steve's managerial position, and they were comparing it to McLaren, and I think it was 10 games when McLaren was sacked. Newcastle have got 18, so they've got a little bit more. There's that little bit of a cushion between them and third bottom at this moment in time, but as we know, within 2 games that could disappear. But if we lose against Everton and we lose against Crystal Palace, would you expect action by Newcastle?
Well, we're coming to the end of January now, and in all honesty, if a change is going to be made, I think it needs to be done now, and you need to give a full 3 months, which is February, March, and April, to and probably it would be Graham Jones who would have that position on a caretaker basis, probably. Allowing him just 10 games or whatever, not good enough. You need more, particularly when things are as bad as they are at Newcastle. Do you know, I've seen some states, some football club in some right states. I have never witnessed anything as so bad as what I'm seeing from Newcastle United right now. I cannot recall anything at all in the years that I've been involved with football, and so it's going to take somebody a long time to turn it round. Players have got themselves into into such a bad state. It's going to take an awful lot to really jerk them out of it. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's going to take a long while.
Yeah, John, what's your take? Do you think we'll see we'll see the axe fall if he loses the next two?
Interesting. Even one of the two things would strike me if I was Ashley, or for that matter, if I was Steve Bruce. The points between third bottom and us, between Fulham and us, has been cut to 6 points as a result of Fulham against Brighton, etc. It's only 6 points. Fulham have got a game in hand, and Fulham West Brom this weekend. If Newcastle lose at Everton and Fulham beat West Brom, both of which are predictable results, the difference would be 3 points. The difference would be 3 points with a game in hand to Fulham. If that result came and we lost on Tuesday, and nothing would be done before Tuesday, we lost on Tuesday to Crystal Palace, then Steve Bruce is in trouble. And if I was Steve Bruce, I would have been comforted so far along the lines that Mike Ashley doesn't sack quickly. He sacks when it's too late, and we've talked about McLaren, etc., etc., etc. But the big difference now is there is a coach in the club that could step up to be caretaker manager in Graham Jones, and that would concern me if I was Steve Bruce. And I'm absolutely certain of that. So a combination of results this weekend with Fulham and Newcastle United, 2 defeats. Jones is in the club. I tell you what, if he hasn't gone at that stage, you're coming up to the next game, and that would be all or nothing. The only if Abramovich was manager, this would have happened 3 weeks ago. I mean, he sacks people on a whim when he gets bored. So what a difference there is between the two managers there, the two owners there. But he is on thinner and thinner and thinner ice with the passing of each day. And he needs results so time starting on Saturday, because if Fulham beat West Brom, I mean, a West Brom victory would tighten things up enormously from Newcastle's point of view as well. But Fulham would really put the cat among the pigeons, because Fulham have drawn 6 of their last 9. They're not getting beat regularly, and that is big pressure on Newcastle United. And by the way, when I give us hope for Everton, Steve, when I was saying that if we're living on hope with Sam and Wilson and the keeper keeping them out, I forgot to mention also that perhaps a Mackham thrown in will come to our rescue as well. Mr. Pickford in goal, one of our greatest pluses on Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah. One thing I would say is for the Everton game this weekend is I hope sincerely he does not leave the goalkeeper out.
Yeah.
I really, because I think he has really superbly at times earned his place. I know Dubravka is a very, very good goalkeeper, but to leave the current fella out, I think would be absolutely wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. A lot of people were asking that in the chat, so thanks for answering that, Malcolm. And we might all be talking about ASM's fitness, but we should also be talking about Malcolm's broadband fitness. It's lasted the full 60 tonight.
I don't know why. There's been some roadworks going on up the way, and I've had the worst connection ever for the last 2 or 3 days. And and then all of a sudden today, it's brilliant.
Well, this is for Virgin, Malcolm.
Certainly, if maximum can last.
We just had a round of applause for Virgin, John. I think you've passed it. I think you passed the gremlins on to John. John froze there. We didn't get anything. Yeah, this is for your Virgin connection, John. There we go. We've had the cheers and we've had the boos. Malcolm's internet's perfect. John's is terrible. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. I'll be back 5:30 tomorrow night with Steve Hasty and Neil Mitchell. Just the three of us, the three amigos. 5:30 until 7:30. Until next week, John, Malcolm, take care, lads.
Indeed. Good night, everybody.
Take care, John. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Steve.
All the best, boys. Bye.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again.